Now my absolute pleasure to introduce MJ Shar. MJ and I have become personally connected because we happen to live very close to one another, and we actually considered doing this together from the same room, but honestly, we're not sure that the internet would be able to contain us both in one room. So we are doing this from across town, but I look forward to our next coffee meetup, MJ. MJ is one of the warmest and kindest individuals that you can meet. She is one of the pioneers in kindness driven performance. So we knew that she was the right person to be our Hero Senior Education Fellow for this event. MJ is armed with a bachelor's in organizational behavior and a master's in applied positive psychology and is a sought after corporate trainer and keynote speaker. Her evidence based approach marries scientific evidence with personal stories and real world applications. She is a collaborator with the American Institute of Preventive Medicine and a common speaker at Ivy League institutions. And MJ, I was hoping to wear this on stage together today, but I bought just for this event my Be Kind t shirt, which I now realize is backwards, but I promise you it says Be Kind. So
I
glad
saw
to
it.
have you with. So glad to have you with us, MJ. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Karen. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here. I need to share my slides, and now I'm blanking. Did we say we said we were sharing this way? Here we go. I am getting us started. My friends, I have waited for this party for such a long time, and I am so happy that we can finally begin. So, first of all, I want to spend just 1 minute, even though I don't have enough minutes to say everything that I want to say this morning. I want to spend a minute to thank you for being here. I believe that our life is truly the sum of where and how we invest our energy. And I promise that today is going to be a very good investment of your time and of your energy. Not only are we going to realize how big of a problem incivility is, but we're going to bring some concrete solutions that actually feel good. So they will be self-reinforcing and they can absolutely rock your world. So without any further ado, I would love to begin and talk about why good people act badly, what it costs us, and what we must do about it. And in our 30 minutes together this morning, I want to tackle three very common misconceptions. The first one is that incivility is a personal behavioral issue. It's not. It's a lot more systemic and cultural than we realize. The second one is that kindness isn't my job. I would like us to reconsider that together. I believe that kindness is all of our jobs, and I'm going to show you why. And the third one is that random acts of kindness are a great thing, and they are enough in themselves. They might be a good place to start, but we need more than that if we really want to make all the journey that we need to make together. So I'd like to share a story with you. I'm at the grocery store one day. I'm third one in line, and the guy who's at the cash is losing his mind over the $1 coupon that the teen cashier, who's probably in her first week on the job, clearly very intimidated by the screaming man in front of her, is telling him, "The system won't take it. I'm sorry, sir. I would really like to honor it. I don't know how. My system rejects it. There must be something wrong." And the guy is like, "Yes, there's something wrong. Of course there's something wrong. You need to honor my coupon." Completely bullying her. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, I need to do something because no one else is. I need to intervene. What do I do? Like, is this an absolute bully? Is this a jerk? Does he need to be put back in his place? Can I do that? What's going to happen if I try? And as I am struggling with all of these thoughts, thankfully, the store manager came and was able to find a way to honor the coupon for this man. So I go through my process, exit the store, and why don't I see right at the corner of the street, but this same man, this time with his wife and three young kids, holding a sign that says, "Lost job, please help." Now I felt like I was the jerk. The $1 coupon wasn't just about saving a dollar, it was survival for this man. And survival mode can throw us into incivility mode faster than we realize. If you think of the people that are acting with incivility at work, maybe they're not hopeless jerks. Maybe they're just struggling humans. Because incivility, if you look at the definition, is rude or disrespectful behavior It is a behavior, not a trait. And we'd like to treat it like a trait sometimes because it feels more satisfying to say, this is a jerk. But if we are honest with ourselves, we too sometimes leave others feeling disregarded or devalued or even unsafe. When we look at the research, cause number one for incivility isn't poor upbringing or the desire to advance oneself. The number one cause is overwhelm. People who have too much stress, too much time pressure, too much exhaustion, maybe too much insecurity, all at the same time. And this is why their body kicks in survival mode. They're not adulting in the best way that they could under other circumstances, and therefore incivility kicks in. These people, as my colleague Luis Aloro posted this week on LinkedIn, they lash out when really what they would mean to do is reach out. So now I'd like to invite you all to join me on a Menti poll. So you might have to take out a second device and you go to menti.com and you use the code 38058703. So when you get on menti.com, menti.com, it will immediately ask you for the code and you plug in 38058703. And when you do that, it will take you to my slide, which you can see right now, which is asking you what causes you to act in less than ideal ways. So if you think of a few times that you have acted with incivility in the past year, in the past couple years, if you at one point bubbled up with anger, you felt your blood literally boiling over, and then you lashed out, you did something that you aren't proud of, and when you think about it, you still feel that sense of guilt and shame, right? If you think of those things, and I won't leave you thinking about those for too long because I know it doesn't feel good, right? What caused you lashing out like that? What caused the incivility? People were tired. They had fear. They were overwhelmed. Hunger. You were hangry. That happens. Lack of resources, not enough sleep, traffic, fatigue, unhappy with myself. Back to those insecurities I was talking about. Lack of time, disrespect, right? Kindness breeds kindness. Incivility breeds incivility. I'm about to talk about that, right? Deadlines, too much going on, lack of control, right? Public criticism, all of these things starts to shuffle in your brain, fighting for your mental power, and suddenly there's just not enough to react well. Suddenly, incivility happens. And you know to whom this mental shuffle is happening right now? Who's going through a whole lot? Just about everyone. 70% of Americans are on survival mode. That's this year's statistics. 54% are quietly cracking. What that means is that on the outside, everything looks like they're handling everything just fine. But when they go to bed at night and there's nobody to, pretend anything for or to, they're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through the next day? 75% of us struggle with low mood due to global political turmoil and political division in the country. And 60% of us report feeling lonely at least some of the time. So you know who's on the verge of committing their next act of incivility right now? Just about everybody. Cause number 2 for incivility. First one was overwhelm. Now it's an emphasis on profit. And I want to thank Jill Schulman for helping me kind of crystallize those thoughts a little bit better. So the problem is not wanting to maximize profits. That's how businesses operate. That is fine. When that is your sole emphasis, when people are there to serve the business as opposed to the business being there to serve people, when results matter more than respect, incivility is bound to thrive. And now I know some people are feeling defensive right now. MJ, we can't challenge the sainthood of profits. I'm not saying that they should not be important. I'm saying that they need to share the spotlight. It is not true that people and profit are a binary choice. We need both. And when we do both, we do better on both fronts. So we need to start to dampen the fallacy that we need to put profit above everything and make them join people in our priority list. Maggie says, yes, thank you. I know that I'm gonna get some pushback on email on that one, and I'm happy to debate with you when we get more time. Third cause for incivility is that we overlook it. It doesn't stand out anymore. Since everybody is on the verge of their next act of incivility, we see it every day. We accept it as part of life. Imagine if you are a customer service rep for an internet company and you pick up the phone all day long, how much screaming you get. Maybe that's the job of the person that my husband and I met in a parking lot not that long ago. We were coming in this direction and this other poor guy was coming in that direction, and there was one parking spot left. And my husband gestured to say, "You go, man, I'm not in a rush, you can have it." But this guy misinterpreted the gesture, probably expecting the fight and the incivility, and he flipped us two birds. One wasn't enough, he needed two. So that did not generate a super positive, empathetic response from us. We had to calm ourselves down for a minute after it. But because incivility happens so much, we accept that it's part of life and it's easy to perpetuate, because it would have been so easy to just turn around and do the same to the next person. We had to calm ourselves down, and sometimes people don't have the time to do that. Yes, Karen, people should be on the asset side of the balance sheet and treated as such. Absolutely. So agreed. So as a result of the prevalence of these three causes for incivility, depending on which survey you look at, we find that 76 to 98% of people have been affected by incivility in the recent past at work. And that doesn't even count at home, at school, on the soccer field. It's everywhere. And if we try to make the math happen, that means that we live through, as Americans, 190 million acts of incivility each day. Now that's an ugly number that I'd like to erase. But here's the thing. These numbers count, probably the perpetrator, the victim, maybe the close witnesses. But incivility spreads like wildfire. It goes way beyond that, right? If I am rude to Karen and you, Maggie, hear my rudeness to Karen, you also feel unsafe. And you also feel the physical consequences like Jonathan Fisher just described. But here's the thing. You're probably not going to keep that to yourself. You're probably going to go see Curtis, and you're probably going to go see Jeanne and a few other people, Maggie, we were talking about Maggie, let me find another name, Ron and Adam and Katie, and you're probably going to tell them about it too. And they will also have been affected to a certain degree by my one act of incivility. All of that causes an emotional drain on us. 80% of workers lose an average of 37 minutes per incident per worker. So I'm incivil to Karen. Karen, if she's part of that 80% statistic, just has lost 37 minutes for my incivility. But because this happens so much, Karen is likely to lose up to 2 days a month of productivity time, or she might decide I need to take some time off altogether because I need to recover from all that toxicity. 66% of people admit having cut back their effort because they couldn't deal with engaging fully for an organization that lets incivility happen. 12% of people have actually left their jobs as a result of incivility. And if you look at a survey of Fortune 500 companies around the world, an unkind workplace is over 10 times more likely to be named as the reason for people leaving than compensation. Now that's the emotional cost. There's also a mental cost. In a research experiment, people were only asked to read rude words. There was no actual incivility committed. We're just reading rude words. And that led them to being 5 times more likely to miss important information on their next task. It impaired their working memory. It increased their mistakes rates, which makes sense because they haven't been able to get all the information. They forgot some of it. It made them take longer to make decisions, and it makes us unwilling to share information easily with our colleagues. It makes us feel like, I don't know if I really need to ask them about this information. Oh, I don't know if they really need that piece of information. I don't know if we really need to communicate at all, because things are just uncomfortable. So I'll just stay in my own little corner. Perpetrates loneliness. All of this together, as Karen has mentioned in the beginning, costs American businesses $2.7 billion daily. When I first read that statistic, I had read yearly. That was my expectation, right? Yearly. And then I said, hold on, that started with a D. It's a billion, yes, with a B. Daily. It's a D. Daily, not yearly. That is just unbelievable. And that does not even count the most important costs of incivility. Because when the mistakes come, when the information is not shared, when we make the wrong decisions in the medical field, in construction, in air traffic, it can cost lives. And in the meantime, for us at home, as John Fisher explained, it damages our physical heart, our physical bodies. So incivility is a huge problem, and we can't pretend it doesn't exist. It's way too costly on way too many levels. And if we're going to tackle it, we got to tackle it with something that will pay off. And I'm sorry to say, civility training isn't it. Because civility does not address the root causes of being systemic or cultural, although it can make a little dent in there, but it is not contagious. If now I am super civil, super respectful, and polite to Karen, Maggie's not going to turn around and talk about it to Katie and Ron the way she did my incivility. It does not spread. It ends at the first level interaction. And also, being polite doesn't heal us physically from the emotional and the physical damage that happen when we feel that dying a little bit inside that comes with incivility. But you know what does what does cure all of these things? The physical drain, the mental drain, the emotional drain, the contagion, and what can be systemic? It's kindness. And I'm about to show you why. But before I do, I'd like to take another little quick poll, go back on Menti. Same code if you weren't able to put it in the first time, 3805-8703. And when I tell you that we need more kindness at work, I want to know how you feel. Some people will say, yeah, that's not my job. Sorry, I have enough to do. Some people will say, yeah, mixed emotions. And apparently the majority of us say, I couldn't agree more. I guess I won't have too much convincing to do with this group, but you might have convincing to do with the groups you work with. So let's embark on that journey. First, what I'd like to say is, if you do not invest in kindness, if you say it's not my job, not going to get involved, then you're going to have to manage its absence. So managers spend on average, hear this out, 7 weeks a year dealing with the fallout of incivility. And according to workers, 74% of this could have been prevented in the first place had we invested a little bit more into kindness. So I think that doing the work on the upfront is a lot more stimulating, a lot easier, much less messy, and definitely worth it. And then what do we find in companies that do that work on the upfront? Well, we find that they outperform their competitors. Why? Because people find friends in the workplace. And when you have a best friend at work, we've known from Gallup for over a decade that it leads to us being 7 times as likely to be engaged in what we do. Now, this stat is not new, but what is new is that Gallup released a report early in January this year saying that this statistic is more relevant in 2025 than it was when they first came out with it. The post-pandemic world confirms this even more. Now, companies that have 3 times more positive energizers, So let me pause right here. What's a positive energizer? Well, if in my interactions with you, I end up feeling uplifted, my energy got a little bit, you know, uplifted, a little bit risen as a result of our interaction. And if that happens on average more often than not, then that means that you are a positive energizer to me. And what we find is that companies that have 3 times more positive energizers, so where the interactions are fulfilling, uplifting, positive, they outperform their competition. So I think that, and there is so much more that we could talk about, but that was like the top things that I could find to convince us that it is worth investing in kindness. Now, those who say, I don't know, I feel like kindness is a little bit weak, I don't want to be a people pleaser or doormat, then you need to learn the difference between kindness and niceness. Those are 2 different concepts, and I invite you to make sure to attend Curtis Morley and Jen Chandis's session this afternoon on the differences between kindness and niceness and what they each do for your culture. But what we find in the research is that when we have more kindness, not niceness, we get a slew of positive repercussions. And here, the research might not always be specifically on kindness if you're really specific with the language and the terminology, but it's declinations. So maybe some of that research that I'm showing you right now is on empathy in the workplace, on psychological safety, on compassion, all things that do not exist outside of kindness. So what happens? We get more support, and that leads to better, more natural collaboration. It helps us feel more adaptable because we know people have our backs. We feel a little bit more bold, we have more self-esteem. We feel like we can innovate better because we don't worry about having to look behind our shoulder every minute of the day. It helps us feel like we are really belonging to our team. There's more meaning through those human connections. That leads to less absenteeism, less overwhelm, connection to incivility right here, friends, and greater talent retention. And, as we've heard from John Fisher, and as we will hear more later today by Kelly Harding, it helps boost our health. So when we say that kindness is the gift that keeps on giving, we often refer to the fact that if I'm kind to you, you are going to be elevated and you might be kind to someone else in return. That is very true. But the physical and the team benefits, I believe, are even more important than this little ripple effect. And if we think about it for ourselves, it makes a lot of sense. Here's a little story of my son James, whom one day missed the bus to go to school in the morning. I'm sure that never happened to you, only happens to me. And it happened that it was a day that I had to pick him up early from school for a dentist appointment. Now, whom you see on the picture with my son James is his friend Leo, who is his bus stop buddy. Ooh, that's hard to say for a French chick. Bus stop buddy. So when Leo was dropped off in the afternoon, most people would have just gone home and said, funny, haven't seen James this morning, haven't seen him this afternoon, hope he's okay, I'll see tomorrow. But not Leo. Leo ran over to our house just to see, is James okay? Is he sick? Anything I can do? And it turned out that everything was just fine. It was just a normal day. He gave James a really big, sincere hug of relief. I was so glad my phone was in my pocket so I could snap this picture. And the reason I bring this up is because I want to ask you, do you have a Leo at work? And what would change if you did? If on the day that you show up with a dimmed light, someone cared enough to say, hey, you don't look like yourself today, what's going on? Hey, here's a warm coffee, hope it cheers you up a little bit. Can I do anything for you? If you felt like your needs were truly seen and that people cared, what would that change for your engagement, for your problem solving, for your willingness to go deep when needed, for your performance on the team, for cohesion? Wouldn't it change everything? I believe that kindness truly does change everything. And I'm going to pause here because I see that there's 11 messages that I have missed here. Thank you, Curtis. I'm glad you liked the story. Thank you for the heart, Maggie. You're welcome on the shout out, Curtis. Glad your heart is melting, Stella. That's what kindness does, makes our heart melt. Humans are built for connection, and kindness is the very foundation of that connection and therefore of how we can collaborate successfully together. But for that to happen, kindness cannot be a bunch of random acts, because if that's all it is, we're going to get temporary boosts. Kindness needs to be our operating system so that it can bring timeless value. And now some of you might be thinking, MJ, does that mean we need to start measuring it? Does that mean we need to evaluate for kindness? And I thought long and hard about that one. And at first I was like, yes, let's create a kindness performance metric. But no. Just like you can't make a plant grow bigger and stronger by pulling on the leaves, what we must do is create the right environment for kindness to flourish. And the right environment is one where values are honored. What we find in the research is that when we take the time to identify our values, our true core values, naturally we activate the parts of our brain which help us attune to other people's needs. And if that's something that sounds sexy to you, make sure to be in Stella Grizin and Lisa Zigarmi's session this afternoon, because they will talk about attunement. We grow more attuned to other people's needs when we take the time to really identify our values. And then when we live them out, well, we find the same benefits basically as when we implement kindness. So that is the right environment that we need to create for people to choose to stay. So what does that mean concretely? At the individual level, it means that you have to know your own values. And that's an exercise I would love to run with you at some point. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. But the goal is to identify what your true values are and not operate under the values that you have inherited from others. And then how do you apply that? Is that instead of asking you, how can I be kind while I pursue my goals? You have to ask yourself, how can I let my values inform my goals and how I achieve them? So value-based decision making. Now this slide could be a half day or even a full day workshop, but what we need at the organizational level as well is systemic values-based decision making. And what that means is that when we hire and when we fire people, there's a strong consideration for their character, not just their performance. That's from the book Good to Great. First who, then what. How we promote. We don't promote simply for goal achievements, sales volume, or quotas achieved, but also we're promoting the positive energizers so that they can radiate on more people. The way we communicate, have you noticed how we use so much war language in the business world? Like, we need to crush the competition. How about we need to rise to the top? Communicating in a values-based way as opposed to warlike language helps us. How we evaluate performance. Talk about the person's impact on the team's well-being or the person's ability, the person's contribution to the team's ability to succeed, as opposed to just them meeting their goals. That consideration needs to be a goal in itself if we want people to come up to the top, just like Profit are. We need to integrate that in the upward accountability. Is your boss treating you with respect? Do you feel elevated after your exchanges? Do you feel like you are heard? And it needs to be part of everything that we do, setting goals, managing deadlines, assigning tasks. All of that together is how we will change what behaviors are culturally acceptable, which get rewarded, and whom we emulate in the company. Now, if you picture your team making decisions through this value-based lens, what do you think becomes possible? And I have just 1 minute left and about 5 more minutes of content, so let's see something come up on that word cloud really quick. And while we do that, Johnny is saying, having a Leo at work absolutely makes a difference. As a leader, we oftentimes are checking in with others to see if they are okay. Having someone check in with me on challenging days is incredibly valuable. And it is so true that we always ask the leaders to check on others, but who's checking on those leaders? They have their bosses, but the higher up the hierarchy you are, the less frequent your interactions with your boss. So we need to check on those leaders as well. Thank you for bringing that up, Johnny. All right, working with purpose, positivity, collaboration, engagement, connection, success, uninhibited creativity, music to my ears, right? People would be looking forward to their workday. They would trust each other a little bit more. It would change everything, right? So now that you have this imprinted on your heart, I hope that it will make you bold to go and move it forward. The good news is a lot of the values work might already be done in your organization. The problem is that it stayed on your website. And this is not work that we do to post on our websites. This is medicine for incivility. It is prevention and treatment for incivility and loneliness and stress and overwhelm. It is a lifeline for people. So it's time that we start implementing those good intentions we once had when we got that meeting and we said in the boardroom or whatever, here are going to be our values. Now we need to use them through everything that we do. But sometimes the gap is we know what we want to do. The values are right there, but I don't have the courage to follow through because that hasn't been culturally what we've been doing. We need a little extra bravery, and for that, we have Jill Schulman, who will come and speak to us in 1 minute. Here, my story was absolutely beautiful, and I no longer have time to tell you. But what I'm going to say is that Bear was a waiter in a restaurant. He was incredibly kind through every single interaction that we had with him. So much so that I told him, Bear, that kindness is what I do. We don't meet people like you very often. How do you do it? What's the trick? And he just said, I'm so glad you're saying that. I lost my granddad this morning, and I wanted to call in sick, but I couldn't do that to my team. So I decided to show up, and I'm trying to do what I can to have a good day. Kindness is why he showed up. It's how he operated, and this is how he had a good day, despite the clearly very big grief and difficulty he was going through. So my friends, our new lens to look through is that incivility is a costly systemic issue. Kindness is everybody's job, and values-based decision-making is the key. I hope you will join me on LinkedIn for more kindness and incivility related conversations. I post a lot of things where it is about the exchanges. It's not just here's my wise thinking, but more let's discuss this, and I would love to have you be part of it.